We are welcome back to the final lesson in the training on the Scrum Master as a role in Scrum Agile. I want to first of all commend you for coming this far. If you are going through this lesson, then you've done so well. It's quite commendable that you've gone these lengthy lessons from module 1 all the way to this last module 4, and now the last lesson in module 4, where we've been looking at best practices in Scrum. And in this last lesson, we would be looking at emergency procedure. Emergency procedure as a practice in Scrum. But a quick recap, of course, is the last lesson, so let's have a quick recap. In this 4th module, we started with the interrupt buffer. And from interrupt buffer, we went to yesterday's weather, then swarming, then daily clean code, then stable team, then happiness metrics. And in the last lesson, we looked at a team that finishes early, accelerates faster. So let's jump right into it without wasting much of the time. So what is emergency procedure? Emergency procedure refers to a predefined set of actions and processes to follow when an unforeseen or critical issue arises that requires immediate attention and resolution. So emergency procedure would be triggered in Scrum. So we only use emergency procedure when there is a critical issue. Sometimes we use emergency procedure as a shutdown mechanism. It's the last resort. It's the final thing. We could cast our mind quickly to a scenario we often use emergency procedure for, and that is when there is fire incidences in a building. When you hear the alarm, you know you need to vacate that particular building, and that is what emergency procedure is all about. So emergency procedure is triggered. So when that alarm beeps in a building, there is a procedure to follow. So that is what we want to quickly look at, the procedure to follow. In a building situation, of course, when the alarm rings, one of the things we've been told over and over again is that you get up from wherever you are doing whatsoever it is and find your way through the fire exit route to the assembly point. You don't go back to pick anything. If you have an important thing, perhaps you have your phone or your laptop or your food or anything on your desk while you are in another place when the alarm rings, you do not go back. You immediately follow the exit plan to the assembly point. And from there, a trained expert to handle the situation will now come into the building. So that's what emergency procedure is. So we have same in Scrum. So such issues could range from several product defects to security breaches or any problem that must be addressed right away, even if it disrupts the current sprint. The aim is to manage these emergencies without causing undue chaos or stress within the delivery. right? So that is what emergency procedure is all about. So we could actually use some of those practices we've spoken about earlier as the action to take when there's an emergency. Such could be like swarming, where we need to swarm at that incident, when we look to look at what needs to be done. So let's look at some of the considerations quickly, so this class will not be too lengthy. So you want to define what an emergency is. What is the emergency that you are considering? Not every situation will be taken for emergency. You need to determine what your emergency is. So an emergency procedure would have been set beforehand. Business would have determined what the emergency procedure is. So we would have identified those likely emergencies. 2, what then is the emergency response plan? How do we respond to that emergency? Then 3, who does what in the case of an emergency? Take for instance, there is a security breach. What is the plan for that? Then who does what? Who undertakes what role? Who is responsible for what? Then fourthly is the communication channel. How do we engage in an emergency? Who sends the message across? There is a security breach. Who raises the alarm? Who do you raise the alarm to? What is the communication protocol? Then afterwards, you need to find out what the impact is by doing your impact assessment. You could do your root cause analysis to find out further. Then from there, you need to now also have consideration for capacity on your buffer and documentation. Everything you find out should be documented. On all the plans you've made, you should train resources adequately to manage those emergencies when they come up. When there's a trigger for such emergency, you should train your workforce adequately. Then still, which is the last one, you need to balance out the speed of work and conversations looking at resolving that emergency. So that would be all on emergency procedure. Quite a good number of teams or organizations may not have a need to use it, but it is an important plan or practice in Scrum to plan for the unforeseen. So when the trigger comes up, you know what to do. So that brings us to the end of this class, Module 4, Lesson 8 of the Scrum Master Training, which happens to be the last lesson in this training. A round of applause for yourselves. Any questions, please? So thank you for starting the training with us from the beginning and seeing the training to this very last end. If you have any question at any time or anything you want us to further discuss, please reach across. I'll be glad to entertain them. Congratulations unto you for completing the Scrum Master training modules. So that will be the final bye-bye.